So who is using social platforms here in the last couple of weeks? Okay. So you are not alone. About 4 billion people around the world are using social media products on a regular basis. It's about 58% of Gen Z in the US. It's about 2.5 hours per day on average. And so, awesome. So before we get into social, we will rewind a bit in the history of the internet. So we'll go back like very far before, doing some archaeology, how we got into this current situation. So before computers, the first tools that we used for communication were either writing on stones, then we got into handwritten books, the printing press, and this whole thing accelerates and brings at the same time a lot of improvements in our life expectancy. Everything explodes after the printing press. Then the TV. The TV is a great tool for manufacturers to sell more stuff by buying advertising. And then the computer. And at that point, the computer is like isolated. You have your little computer, and the only way you can send files to people is through these little devices that some of you here may know about. And then comes the internet. So the internet means you can connect all those computers together, and this is much bigger than a new technology of information. A lot of people actually have seen internet as like, oh, it's just a new media. We have like the TV, we have the press. Internet is going to be a new media, so we'll just replicate the same models. Magazines become online magazines, shop become online shop, and that's going to be it. But actually, back then, some people thought that internet would like not really succeed, which is quite funny, but we see the parallels here. So at the beginning of the internet, the network is very fragmented, but very decentralized. What I mean by that is that, so if you take content ownership governance, the internet is on that side of the spectrum. Very decentralized and very fragmented at all levels. And so the reason for that is that Web 1 is the internet of webmasters. In order to be able to express yourself on the internet, you have to be able to do that kind of stuff, meaning HTML, putting images together, creating your own content and so on, and very few people have all those skills at the same time. So it creates a very small community of people who can express online. So it's a creative playground, but for webmasters. And so if you think about it philosophically, actually the first HTML pages were similar to the NFTs today. So the first websites were NFTs in the sense that it's a creative piece that has a unique domain name. The domain name market acted a bit like the NFTs in the sense that you could, buy blabla.com and then create something on it, and people would speculate on domain names with like domain squatting and so on. Domain names are like, the prototype for NFTs. So you have like a lot of things that look like art piece today, but that were basically what people were building with websites. But the problem of that version of the internet is that it misses the coordination layer, meaning that all those websites are chaotic. You cannot really find them. You have to kind of like walk around on the internet, click randomly, and discover some new website, which was quite funny and exciting, by the way. But humans, we like orders. We like reliability. We like to be able to find what we need, which was which was the invitation for a big organizer. So when you have like massive chaos and fragmentation, what happens is that someone steps in to provide organization. And so that's the rise with the first dynamic websites of search engines. And what's actually also funny to look at in terms of understanding how volatile things are on the internet, you had a monopoly on internet browsers. It was Netscape. So when AOL bought Netscape for a few $1 billion, they thought that they bought the internet. And 6 months later, Internet Explorer came in. Same for search engines. When Google started, there was like a monopoly, and it was Alta Vista, and everyone was using Alta Vista, and that was it. There was no way any new search engine could make it. So then those guys came. They invented the Pagerank Algorithm, which completely changed the game. So it kind of looks like this. And with PageRank, basically, you get much more coordination. You are able to find content. You are able to like have this one homepage that connects all those websites together and understands the meaning of how those links are formed and so on. But you also have to compromise and lose some. So the websites are still there. You cannot like ban them. They are still decentralized. But Google kind of decide in which order they can show up. So we trade coordination for decentralization. And you will see this trade, that's how we get basically into Web2. We will keep doing that kind of trade. So humans are social animals. We love to be together. That's a great example. This conference is a great example, which leads to Web2, which is a web that is decentralized and fragmented to completely coordinated, but completely centralized as well. So, so we are going more in this direction. So the content is like highly decentralized because anyone can publish online. It's not just the webmasters, it's like really everyone. But we are losing a lot in ownership because now the content is the property of those Web2 companies. So at the beginning, you have an experimental phase. Here, I would like to highlight also this very interesting similarity with the current state of Web3, which is that you have all those startups trying to explore the primitives for Web2. They are trying all kinds of things. So you have like FeedBurner for the feeds, you have Flickr for the pictures. Like each one is doing only one thing and trying to see how far they can go with that one experiment. And so 2004, 5, 6, it's like full of Web2. It's a kind of bubble, similar to the Web 1 bubble, but a bit better. But yeah, a lot of exploration and a lot of logos. And I don't know if you have seen that or if you remember when you would like have a share button, and when you hover the share button, you would have like 25 different social networks, and you would like pick which ones you use. So those are basically the primitives, and then come the primitive combinators. So people like this guy, David Karp, who created Tumblr, Jack, and Mark. So all those guys, basically what they will do is look at all the primitives that work on Web2 and try to combine them and package them into one experience. Because people don't like to use like 70 different apps to do 70 different things. At the end of the day, you have to understand what's the common denominator between all those things and bring them to one product. And so this marks a new direction for the internet. At that point, 2007, 8, 9, 10, the web is going to turn into something where it's about attention, it's about screen time, it's about data, it's about network effects. The KPIs are CPM, like views and so on. And this is not the only way the internet could work. And as we are currently challenging it today, that's not the only way the internet can work. But that's the direction that the internet took at that moment, when it becomes, free. You have ads, and then you have network effect, and if you win the network effect game, you completely take over the internet. So the social component, so humans are social, combined with the attention economy with consumerism, that leads to hyper-alienation. And so that's kind of where we are now, and that's why we want to build a new internet. So you start to see stories like that popping with depression, suicide, that of course are not only attributed to Web2, but this is definitely a factor. And so Web2 basically has reached that point when companies got public and so on, where there is no real moral compass, there is no real leadership, there is no real community. It's just people all doing their job. They are just doing their job. They are just trying to get a little bit more clicks, a little bit more time on screen. But this has become a machine that can become extremely dangerous. So that machine, I would present it this way. You have the centralized financial institutions that pump money to some VC firms, that give it to CEOs who hire people whose KPIs are how do we get more data and more brain time. So this is the data, this is the face time. And then the funny part is that the same financial institutions are funding brands that hire influencers whose job is to keep people on the screen as long as possible so that they can buy their products. So we have the full circle like this with like the centralized authority that's like funding the alienation on one side and funding the consumption, often of products that should not be consumed. So it's a bit like having an exoskeleton where you have the internet like this, and then you have this like force outside that's kind of like centralized and driving the way this internet works. So Web 2 is broken, obviously. Engagement is not a good representation of quality. Having something that keeps people on screen doesn't mean that it's really good. So it leads to like reels and clickbait, and if you play that game of like screen time, you get what gets screen time, not what produces quality. So you get that kind of behavior. So those are creators, but they are actually not really the creator economy. They are a repackaging of the attention economy into creators. Their goal is to keep you on screen as long as possible, to catch your attention and to keep you until the next video loads. Is this quality? Yes, some form of quality, but it's maybe a small fragment of quality. It shouldn't be the whole internet traffic. This in crypto, I think we have all seen those like thumbnails, and they exist because the algorithm wants that. The algorithm is telling them, if you do that kind of images, I will give you a lot of clicks and you will get a lot of views. So people just behave according to what the algorithm provides. Same with like, the polarization. So the algorithm will give you things that radicalizes you and that makes you hate other people, and then you get into this like Twitter fights and so on. This is also part of the game that Web 2 is leading society towards. So not only it has those challenges, it's also extractive. So tech is representing a $1 trillion industry. It doesn't redistribute anything. It claims ownership over everything it collects. And it pushes towards, more alienation, people spending their time on screen, so you get what you paid for. Now you look at life around you, in the metro, everywhere, everyone is on their screen. And obviously it's extractive also in the sense that it tends to do what it does, which is seeking profit. And so the more we can optimize for profit, the more we can make people, work and produce value for those networks, the better. It's also intrusive, obviously, so all this data, a lot of people are paranoid. Is my phone listening to me or not? Very hard sometimes. Phones and apps guess stuff that are surprisingly accurate. Yeah, great quote from Google. And so, yeah, don't be evil, completely disappeared, this motto. So the other problem is that they are arbitrary, so we don't really know what they do with content. So sometimes things get, hidden. You don't really know why. They get deleted. So actually, I did this presentation way before this whole like Twitter thing with Elon Musk. But that's the conversation we should be having. The accounts are demonetized, so you are still there, but you don't get advertisements. Why? Who knows? New algorithms. One day you are on top of Google, the next day or any of those apps, and the next day you disappear and you don't know why. Your account can be Account can be demonetized, suspended, new features, API deprecated, and so on. So then, I would like to just get this. So this part is kind of fictional. Like, where can Web 2.0 go if we really push to the extreme? If we really want to keep going in this direction, what are the things that could happen? So first, it means that we are super low on the centralization spectrum. We forget about decentralization. We are pretty high on coordination when it comes to content, but otherwise it's super fragmented. And then you have this centralized authority that controls everything, that concentrates by essence, because whatever is designed for concentration will continuously concentrate and gain even more power. And you get this crazy machine with like all those nice toys controlling us. So the robots and the chips and the QR codes and like all those stuff connected to one database that's run by 10 people. Like that's the maximum, you know, point it can get. So it looks like a dystopia. We talk about those topics, you know, on science, like in the context of science fiction. I love the Black Mirror series. But then it gets more interesting when you see that those things are actually starting to come. So you see, you know, the emergence of all those like conspiracy theories about chips, implants, and so on. It's actually now happening. Then you see, you know, World Economic Forum and all those organizations like claiming, haha, you will have nothing and you will be happy in 2030. Like that's basically the kind of stuff that are coming in the real world. Yeah, that's an interesting metaphor. And so then you see like all those things from Matrix, artificial wombs. It's a thing now. It's being experimented on. The robots now, they can, the stuff from Black Mirror, they can come to you and ask you to wear your mask. They can shoot at you now with the guns and so on. So when you wake up to that Web3, you know, you realize that actually there are lots of people who are trying to be whistleblowers and trying to like prevent those things. Steve Jobs has been one of them. I think all his work has been dedicated to giving people equal means to manipulate, you know, data and information. People like Jaron Lanier, Shoshana Zuboff, sorry. So all those people basically have tried to warn us. And we kind of like them, but we don't really realize how important it is. This is just for the lols. So what can regulators do? Not so much, even though they are very well intended. They may like the skills. So, you know, you see this meme is quite funny. Like you see when they ask questions that it's very hard to be expert at everything. So we cannot really expect the solutions to come from that part. And so if we don't make a very fast move with Web3, we are taking that existential risk. And so, yeah, I'm a bit dramatic today, but sometimes it's also good to remember why we do all of this. So if you look at, you know, the race for AI, everyone is investing heavily. The countries are competing. The tech giants are competing. They are acquiring all those AI companies and concentrating all this AI power into fewer and fewer hands. So what is Web3? Why? How did it start? You know, and so again, a little bit of history. Web3 is not just a technology. It's a political technology. It's an economical, social, cultural, and so on. That the goal is to go back to decentralization, but with the coordination. So when you look at Web 1, it has super decentralization, but it's chaos. How do we keep that decentralization from Web 1, but bring the coordination of Web 2? So before Bitcoin, you have actually a lot of attempts at decentralization. So Your.Bit has been around for a pretty long time. I see that they are sponsored here. Amazing project. Diaspora, Matrix, BitTorrent, and so on. So all those are like attempts at providing decentralization, but they kind of lack the open state, like the shared open state that gives access to this like one source of truth that prevents double spend problems. So Bitcoin will be the technology that people will choose for decentralization or blockchain because it has this property. And the first use case is money. And it comes in the context of money printing, which was a problem identified in the early 2000s. So you have the cypherpunks who try to solve that problem, that regulators are not really able to face the power of big finance, who's actually laughing at the Occupy Wall Street protesters. So 2009, we go from cryptocurrency to blockchain, so from Bitcoin to solving the problem of hyperinflation, which actually is also a problem that's coming back right now. It's a big topic. And it's funny when you hear politicians saying, we had no way to guess that this, inflation would be a problem. Actually, the Bitcoin guys were talking about it back in the early 2000s. So Bitcoin, Satoshi, the first use cases for blockchain actually are not, they are not general purpose blockchains. Like they are application specific blockchains. And this is an area that was explored at the beginning. but it was probably too early. So you have things like Steemit, for example. And then comes the debate about general purpose blockchain. So we want to experiment all kinds of things, and how do we get from like application specific to identifying all the primitives? And for that, we kind of need to go back to this phase that we had in Web 2, which is, yeah, actually at the beginning, it's a very small group of people who are doing all those stuff. So we go to this like DApp era, which is 2017, the ICO craze, where in order to identify things like NFTs or DeFi or DAOs, you have to try all those things. So a lot of people look at 2017 like, you know, the bubble or whatever. I see it as like an experimental phase with lots of laboratories trying lots of different things, fast forward with a lot of money. And we have learned a lot, and that's why we have now those primitives. So, so the ownership economy, so where this is all going. If we want to escape this Web 2, you know, dystopian scenario, we want to bring a new model for the internet. And so this decentralized, coordinated internet has as a requirement to be networked. So you need to have all those applications, all those things working together. And so here I'm going to, you know, the theme of this talk is social 3.0. If you look at DAOs, DeFi, NFTs, and so on, they have this thing in common. And what is the common denominator between all those things? So as we mentioned earlier, humans are social. We like to do things together, to be in networks. And so if you look at a DAO, basically it's a social network defined with democratic components that have implications in the real world. Yeah, so it looks like a social network where you actually vote. If you look at NFTs, it's social creative value discovery. Let's come together and give a prize to something, and I'm talking about NFT arts in that regard. And then you have DeFi, which is doing economics and finance on a social network. So the goal with Social 3.0 is to coordinate all those smart contracts, all those use cases for crypto into an experience that can bring all those things together. And so, yeah, we have also to avoid that thing, fake social 3, you know, all those like metaverse is not Web3 necessarily. And so Social 3.0 is a bit like the iPhone of crypto. When Steve Jobs came to present the first iPhone, he started the talk with like, I'm going to show you something about a web browser and a phone and I don't remember what was the third one. An iPad, yeah. An iPod. And so, and at the end, if you found out that it's actually one product. And I think we need to get there. We need to get to this like one product that kind of combines all those things together. So yeah, you have like all the dApps, you know, all the different experiments that led to the creation of the iPhone, which is, we call it a phone, but it actually does everything. It's your entire life. So yeah, I think creative value discovery, if I have time, but I think I don't. But yeah, very briefly, creative value discovery is the use case, you know, how to come together and define the value of something within the creative economy. It's a 2.2 trillion industry. And the goal is to move everyone into the creative economy because anyway, robots will automate most of the jobs. And yeah. So if you want to continue the conversation, I'm here at the conference. So thank you so much, guys.